Hey Steve Lubiana. Today we're just going to talk a bit about biodynamics and the viticulture you've been using for the past few decades.
Sure.
So I've got some questions here. So the first one is chemicals, chemical synthesized herbicides, fungicides and fertilizers have been used since the 1940s. What impact do you think these have had on modern farming, and why is it taught in our academic institutions?
Well, I'll give it a go. I mean, academic institutions, don't know much about, but the impact of man-made chemicals have had a severe effect on the environment and the soils. Now, and I believe these chemicals were first used because of their fast, instant results and the money that could be made from farmers by post-war corporations. Having the faith in science, farmers used these practices and became stuck in a closed system where their crop could be fixed only by buying the next chemical product. I believe many of them wanted to go back to the old ways of organics, but their soils were so destroyed and they had little faith or will to return to the ways of the past. Some farmers saw that damage taking place and the quality of produce declining and decided that this type of farming was not good, but still maintained their own organic traditional approach. And I think now we're seeing this in the quality of the wines if you look back from the past decades of the 50s, 60s and 70s. I think academic institutions are a bit short-sighted of natural observations. They can only see a benefit in numerical statistics or corporate interest, and they don't really tend to study the positive effects of organics and biodynamics because there's just no funding in it.
And you did study a degree in viticulture at the Adelaide University in Australia. Did you have any lectures on biodynamics or organics back
No,
then?
no, not at all. No, I didn't even, come across the agenda at all.
Yeah, all right. So do you think modern day farmers are missing a lot of knowledge that ancient farmers knew and practiced over the last 10,000 years of agriculture?
Well, going on from my last question, I think modern agricultural science is a bit foolish to think that their systems are more advanced and environmentally sustainable than those of past farmers who had thousands of years of observations and connections with the land. Simple methods of ancient moon planting have been used by the Egyptians to sow seeds and work the soil at the right moon phases for ages. From the simplest form, it's obvious. Look at the large change in ocean tides, and let's think about all the water in the soil and the plants, and how can the plants and soil not be affected by that same gravitational pull?
I believe you were the first in Tasmania to be certified biodynamic, and you're still the only certified site. Is that true?
I think so. Yes, that's best my knowledge. We're still the only one.
Yeah, right. Pinot Noir is known as a very difficult variety to grow and is prone to many problems. Do you think this variety benefits from biodynamics in Tasmania?
Well, yeah, well, it's not just Pinot Noir, but all grape varieties benefit from biodynamics. Pinot Noir, being a thin-skinned variety, is more susceptible to fungal disease. Biodynamics helps the skins become tougher, resulting in healthier vines less prone to disease, and in doing so increases the phenolic content of the grapes. This is very important as a major quality parameter of red wine is the skin, and I believe this is why Burgundy has seen a resurgence in biodynamics, and many of the top wines come from these biodynamic domains.
Can you tell us about the biodynamic spray 500 and what is it and what's its use in the farming?
So this is one of the crux of biodynamics. It's a very important spray. So 500 is a soil spray. It's made by packing fresh cow manure into cow horns, and that's buried in the soil and left over winter to develop and transform. And we use a cow horn as it's a natural vessel. It's porous and it keeps the manure from becoming too wet, while allowing fungi and especially specifically actinomycetes, I think it's called, which I think are a kind of bacteria, to enter and ferment that manure. If you pack that manure into a glass jar or another vessel, it will just go stinky and rotten. It only works in the horn, and I think the more you use those horns, the horn actually becomes thinner and thinner. So they actually consume the horn during this process, and the horn is made out of the same material as your fingernails.
Yeah, right. That's crazy.
Yeah. So with the aid of the horn's shape, also that tapered shape, the cosmic forces can be channeled into that fermented manure as well, and this results in a dense carrier for life forces and microorganisms, fungi and bacteria that can be used on the soil.
Yeah. So there's two sort of parts to the horn manure, and that's I guess you could call it the more scientific part of it, which is the bacteria and the fungi that's in it, and then the second part is the cosmic forces, which is more on a spiritual level.
Yeah, a bit more esoteric, but yeah, I mean that's something that not everybody understands, but if it's working, it's we can see it work.
Yeah. Is there a reason it is sprayed during the afternoon, and why is so little needed for such a big area?
It's sprayed in the late afternoon when the sun has dipped, as UV light will kill the microbes, and it's also when the earth is breathing in, and so you want it to pull into the soil, because it's a soil spray. We don't spray it on the vines. It's not for the plants, but it's for the soil. And typically it's sprayed in autumn and spring when temperatures are warm and the growing seasons are beginning or ending. And very little is needed due to the stirring process. The bacteria and the colonies are broken up into tiny fragments, and therefore the population explodes. And the final dilution therefore has sufficient concentration. And there's also a homeopathic process to this, which is a little bit deep to get into at the moment, but that's a bit more of that life force and energizing. So actually an energizing effect, that stirring.
Yeah, and that stirring's got a specific name, doesn't it?
Yeah, probably. I don't know what it is.
I think it's called dynamizing.
Oh, dynamizing. Yeah. That's right.
It goes clockwise in the vortex.
That's right, and you change
clockwise.
Chaos in the vortex in the other direction.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, we have to do it for 1 hour. We just spray it. Yeah.
And 501 is the next important spray. Can you elaborate on this one a bit?
Yeah. As 500 is the soil spray, 501 is the atmospheric spray, and is a more of a focus on providing photosynthesis and disease resistance to the leaves of the plant by reflecting light and creating heat and bringing cosmic forces into the canopy. It's sprayed up in the air, not on if you sprayed it on the vine leaves, it would burn the vine leaves. So you definitely spray it up in the air. It's made from a quartz crystal, water slurry that's buried in a cow horn over the summer period. And the preparation is the same as for 500.
In terms of spraying it?
In terms of dynamizing it.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense to have like the yin and yang with the atmospheric and the soil.
Yeah, so our soils at Granton, are very high in silica, and so we don't need a lot of 501. Where we have a poorer soil, so we need a lot more 500 than 501, and that's something that we have to read and be observant, and to know, if we had a wet, like say our vineyard down the Huon Valley, which is much wetter and damper, needs more 501 than 500.
And do you use biodynamic compost, and how's it made?
Yeah, of course we use compost. We make it on site every year after harvest. We use all our grape waste from the winery, and we mix that with a little clay, some fine bark shavings, and chicken manure. This is turned and kept moist and fermented over a few weeks, and then we add the 6 compost biodynamic preparations, which each aid in their own task of mobilising minerals and elements such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium. And the compost is then spread under the vines in late winter.
Mm. And how would you compare your biodynamic compost, say, to the average compost that a household might make or something like that?
Well, we after the compost is fermented, and then we let it go through the humus building phase. And a lot of composts, the commercially produced ones, they just apart from bits of plastic waste, and they don't know. We don't know what the ingredients are. We have all our raw materials tested to make sure that there aren't any heavy metals or GMO products and things like that in it. And we let it go through that humus building phase, so we get a very dark. And if you squeeze the compost and then let go, it should stain your hand. So, and that to me is a good sign that it's fully broken down, and it's really going to help the soil.
Mm. And for the next question, what effect has biodynamics had on soil compaction?
Yeah, interesting question. Well, biodynamics has a part to play for sure, but there are other important, I call them gentle farming practices, such as not using the tractor when it's too wet. Don't cultivate the soil if it's too wet. Because these, can, the sort of behaviour can all contribute to, more soil compaction. I've seen a large change in the last 10 years, and you can feel it when you walk in the vineyard. It's much softer underfoot. I think the soil has less bulk density and increased porosity.
Do you use cover crops such as seeded crops between the vine rows at all?
Yeah, we've been doing this for quite a while now. We've sort of moved from putting on lots and lots of compost, which is a man-made, it takes energy and a lot of work to, buy things, and going back to on-farm and trying to be more self-contained, which is the true objective of biodynamics, is where, everything stays on the farm. And so, like this year, we've planted beans during autumn, and these beans will grow over winter and fix nitrogen back into the soil. We also grow companion plants for beneficial insects such as buckwheat, Lycium, Phacelia, to give a home and food for beneficial insects. And these crops are planted in spring before the growing season, in every second row. And we turn our cover crops in, and that again is to feed the soil, which then will feed the vines.
And this is not a new thing, really, is it?
No, it's been used for farmers for years.
Yeah.
But it's just so much quicker, cheaper, simpler just to put on your artificial nitrogen fertilizers.
Yeah, than going out and buying some seeds. How is canopy disease managed, such as powdery mildew, downy mildew, in the vineyard?
Well, we're lucky to be situated in a dry environment, and diseases are managed by just a few sprays a year using potassium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, elemental sulfur, and sometimes copper, not a lot. And with good timing and open canopies, we just don't have a problem.
Yeah, right. And how do you approach insects that become a problem in the vineyard?
Other than not getting them in the first place, by having a balanced ecosystem, that's why we grow the flowers in the vineyard. We use pheromone strips, which disrupt reproductive systems, which so they work for lipo and apple moth.
And they're just what? It's
a little plastic strip which we tie to the wires every 6 or 7 meters, and disrupts the mating behaviour, so they can't reproduce.
Yeah, right. Weeds seem to be the most difficult problem to overcome in some vineyards that are converting to organic/biodynamics. How is this approached in Granton, and what have you learnt is the best system at your site?
It's a big question. We've tried many types of weed management, from undervine mowing, sheep grazing, to cultivation, and we've found undervine cultivation to be the most effective for us when done correctly for our soil type and our climate. We use a combination of implements such as discs, knives, finger hoes, tooth discs, by disrupting the weeds that are unable to grow, and therefore the vines have less competition for nutrients and water. The main thing is just that if the weeds are there, they're going to suck all the nutrients and the water out of the ground, which we don't want. Otherwise, they're not a problem. In our Huon Valley vineyard, for example, we have much higher rainfall, and we've got the sandy soil, and so I don't mind a little bit of weed growth there, because that tends to hold the soil together, and the vines have got much more vigour there and deeper root systems, so they're not really competing with the vines, so not much of a problem. So we have to look at each vineyard case by case and determine, are the weeds a problem, and if they are, deal with them. If they're not, don't worry about them. Yeah. And so, the cultivation we use is a gentle cultivation, and that also removes the shallow feeder roots on the vines, and that forces the roots to go deeper into the soil profile.
Those feeder roots, they're just sitting on the surface, and it's sort of stopping like the main bigger roots from going deeper.
Yeah, well, if they can get all their nutrients from their feeder roots, then they have less reason to go deeper. So we're sort of forcing to go deeper. But after a few years, they head down there anyway, and I think we get more expression, more terroir expression that way as well. I think it helps in that department.
Yeah, for sure. In the cellar, are you using less of certain products? Is there a perceived increase in tannins from biodynamics?
Well, we've never really used a lot of fining agents, or too much sulfur. But of course, with better balance in the vineyard comes better balance in the wine, and the tannins are better. The less green tannins, even in the cold years. And this is due to earlier phenolic ripeness at lower sugar levels and higher skin and seed quality.
Yeah, that's sort of going back to talking about the seed and the skin quality, and
that's thicker skins, because they're not pumped. The vines aren't pumped up with chemicals, therefore they have to search and feed and work with the microbes to extract the nutrients out of the soil. And this takes a bit of energy, and so the leaves become thicker, like more leathery, and more, and therefore they're tougher, so they're more resistant to disease. And that also applies to the grapes themselves, the berries, so they become tougher as well, and that toughness means thicker, and so they also mature quicker. But the maturity is phenolic maturity, so the sugar doesn't rush, but the vines mature faster, so the seeds are denser and harder and browner earlier in the season.
Yeah, I also think the colour of organic wines, I generally feel that they tend to be a bit more on the darker side. Do you see the colour?
Yeah, I think so. All the colour's good. That goes with the seed having thicker seeds. Thicker skins. You'd imagine you'd see more anthocyanins in the wine. Yeah. Assuming they're extracted, correctly.
Are there any other viticultural ideas you'd like to undertake in the future?
Yeah, we've always got plenty of ideas. We've got a biodynamic close planted plot of Pinot and Chardonnay, which has overhead irrigation to mimic natural rainfall, which is the direction we're going now rather than using drip, and that's coming into its second summer. And we're also planning a high density bush vine Shiraz planting on some really, really poor gravelly soils.
And that overhead irrigation is, like you said, to mimic natural rainfall. That's just to spread the water, I guess, a bit more on the soil.
That's right. So the roots aren't, just growing into one spot, where the drippers drip, but growing, as if they would, in a higher rainfall, in a rainfall environment.
Because you're only getting like a few 100 mil a year at Granton.
Yeah, so we're about, our annual rainfall is probably around about 450 mils of rain.
Yeah, so it's pretty dry.
Yeah, and that's mostly winter.
Many vineyards in Europe are certified biodynamic, including some of the most prestigious in the world. What do you think is stopping Australian vineyards from converting to biodynamics or even organics?
I think most grape growers are too scared, and it's the fear of losing the annual crop to disease if they don't buy and apply chemicals. It's just nonsense. The first 3 years can be tricky, but past that, it's simple agriculture, as long as you're observant and well organised. Yeah,
I think you can't be lazy if you're gonna be organic. You've got to be on the ball, and that comes with being a good farmer.
You have to be a good farmer first, absolutely.
When you started back in 2010, did you come close to losing your crop at all, or
no
problems?
No, not at all, not even close. Because we hadn't been using chemicals intensely, and so the soil was in pretty good condition, and we'd been using and we'd been using compost a lot earlier, and so that transition we didn't have any problem. The poor years we had were just due to rainfall during flowering, which nothing can really help. So yeah, apart from that, was not a problem. Hopefully we'll have better seasons to come.
Yeah, that's good. All right, great words, and thank you for your time.
No worries. Cheers.